Catherine Park sat in her usual corner table at Meridian Café, reviewing quarterly reports on her tablet while sipping her morning latte. At 42, she had built a tech empire that employed over 3,000 people, but success had come at a personal cost that she carried with her every day. The cafe was her refuge from the corporate world, a place where she could think clearly without the constant interruptions of meetings and phone calls. She had discovered it 5 years ago, and had been coming here every Tuesday morning since, finding comfort in the routine and the anonymity it provided. As Catherine scrolled through financial projections, movement near the window caught her attention. A teenage girl had entered the cafe, moving with the kind of careful grace that suggested someone trying not to draw attention to herself. The girl was perhaps 17, with long dark hair and delicate features that seemed hauntingly. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as the teenager turned toward her direction. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her obvious youth. It was like looking at a photograph of herself from 25 years ago. The girl ordered a simple coffee and found a table near the window, pulling out a worn paperback book and settling in to read. Catherine watched her with growing certainty and mounting emotion, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her tablet. For 18 years, Catherine had wondered about her daughter. She had imagined what she might look like, what kind of person she had become, whether she was happy with the family that had adopted her. The private investigators had provided updates over the years, school achievements, family moves, general well-being, but Catherine had never allowed herself to make direct contact. Now, by pure chance, her daughter was sitting 30 feet away, completely unaware that her birth mother was watching her with a heart full of love, and Catherine knew she should leave, should respect the boundaries that had been established 18 years ago. But looking at Emma, for she was certain this was Emma, she felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. Chapter 2. Recognition and Memory. Emma Chen looked up from her book, sensing someone's gaze upon her. She scanned the cafe casually, her eyes briefly meeting those of an elegantly dressed woman sitting alone in the corner. The woman quickly looked away, but not before Emma caught something intense and emotional in her expression. The woman was beautiful in the way that successful people often were: polished, confident, with an air of authority that suggested she was accustomed to being in control. But there had been something vulnerable in her eyes, something that made Emma curious despite herself. Emma returned to her book, but found herself glancing back at the woman periodically. There was something familiar, though Emma was certain they had never met. Perhaps it was just the kind of face that reminded her of someone else. Or maybe the woman simply had one of those memorable presences that commanded attention. Catherine struggled to maintain her composure, her mind flooded with memories of the day she had given birth to Emma. She had been 24, unmarried, and facing financial ruin after her startup had failed. The decision to place her daughter for adoption had been the most difficult of her life, but she had believed it was the only way to give her child the stable, loving home she deserved. The adoption had been arranged through a reputable agency, with careful screening of potential parents. Catherine had chosen David and Linda Chen, a couple who had struggled with infertility for years, and who promised to love Emma as their own. The agreement had included updates until Emma turned 18, but no direct contact. Now, seeing Emma as a young woman, Catherine felt both pride and profound sadness. Emma was clearly intelligent, well cared for, and confident in a way that suggested she had been raised with love and support. But Catherine had missed every milestone, every achievement, every moment of growth and discovery. Emma closed her book and checked her phone, apparently preparing to. Catherine felt panic rise in her chest at the thought of letting this opportunity slip away. After 18 years of wondering and waiting, fate had brought them to the same place at the same time. Catherine made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She stood up, gathered her courage, and approached Emma's table. Chapter 3. The Approach. Catherine's heart pounded as she crossed the cafe, each step bringing her closer to the daughter she had never stopped loving. Emma looked up as she approached, her expression polite but curious about this stranger who was clearly intending to speak with her. "Excuse me," Catherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know this might sound strange, but you look very familiar. Have we met before?" Emma studied Catherine's face more carefully, noting the expensive clothes, the confident posture, and the underlying nervousness that seemed at odds with her polished appearance. "I don't think so," Emma replied. "I'm pretty good with faces, and I'm sure I'd remember meeting you." Catherine felt a mixture of relief and disappointment, relief that Emma didn't recognize her, which meant the adoption had been handled discreetly as promised. Disappointment that there was no instinctive recognition, no mysterious bond that transcended their years of separation. "May I sit down?" Catherine asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from Emma. "There's something I need to tell you, and I think you should hear it." Emma hesitated, her instincts warning her that this conversation was about to become complicated. But there was something in Catherine's eyes, a combination of hope and fear, that made her nod her agreement. Catherine sat down carefully, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. She had imagined this moment countless times over the years, but none of her mental rehearsals had prepared her for the reality of sitting across from her daughter. "My name is Catherine Park," she began, watching Emma's face for any sign of recognition. "And I know, that you're Emma Chen." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "How do you know my name? Do you know my parents?" Catherine felt her heart break a little at the question. "In a way," she said softly. "Emma, there's something about your family that you might not know. Something about where you came from." Emma set down her coffee cup, her full attention now focused on Catherine. "What do you mean?" Catherine took a deep breath, knowing that the next words would change everything. "They never told you I was your mother." Chapter 4. The Revelation. Emma stared at Catherine in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, too enormous and life-changing to be real. "That's impossible," Emma said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents are David and Linda Chen. They've been my parents my whole life." "They are your parents," Catherine said gently. "They raised you, loved you, gave you everything I couldn't, but I'm your birth mother. I gave birth to you 18 years ago and placed you for adoption because I believed it was the best thing for you." Emma felt the world tilt around her. She had always known she was adopted. Her parents had been honest about that from the beginning, but they had told her that her birth mother had requested no contact, that she wanted to move on with her life without any connection to the child she had given up. "You're lying," Emma said, but even as she spoke the words, she could see the resemblance Catherine had mentioned. Looking at this woman was like looking into a mirror that showed her own future. The same eyes, the same bone structure, the same unconscious gestures. Catherine reached into her purse and withdrew a small photo, placing it on the table between them. It was a hospital picture of a newborn baby, taken moments after birth. "This is you," Catherine said softly. "The only picture I was allowed to keep." Emma picked up the photo with trembling hands, studying the tiny face that was unmistakably hers. On the back, someone had written, "Emma, born March 15th, 3:47 a.m., 7 lbs 2 Oz, in careful hands." "Why now?" Emma asked, her voice thick with "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I saw you here, and I couldn't walk away," Catherine. "I've been looking for you for years, not to disrupt your life or take you away from your family, but just to know that you're okay, that you're happy." Emma looked around the cafe, suddenly aware that other people were continuing their normal conversations, while her entire understanding of herself was being rewritten. "Do my parents know you've been looking for me?" "No," Catherine said. "The adoption was supposed to be closed, but I've had private investigators keeping track of your well-being, making sure you were safe and loved. I know about your academic achievements, your acceptance to Stanford, your volunteer work at the animal shelter." Chapter 5. Processing the Truth. Emma felt overwhelmed by the flood of information and emotions Catherine's revelation had unleashed. Everything she thought she knew about her origins had just been turned upside down, and she struggled to find solid ground in the chaos of her thoughts. "You've been watching me," Emma said, not sure whether to feel comforted or violated by the knowledge. "All these years, you've known where I was, what I was doing." "Only the basics," Catherine said quickly. "I never interfered, never tried to contact you directly. I just needed to know that you were safe and happy. The reports I received were always general: school performance, family moves, major milestone, nothing invasive." Emma studied Catherine's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but what she saw was genuine emotion, a mixture of love and regret that seemed too raw to be fabricated. "Why did you give me up?" Emma asked, the question that had haunted her since childhood, finally finding voice. Catherine's composure wavered, and Emma could see tears gathering in her eyes. "Because I was 24, alone and broke. My startup had failed, I had no family support, and I was facing eviction from my apartment. I couldn't give you the life you deserved." "But you're successful now," Emma observed, taking in Catherine's expensive clothes and confident demeanor. "You obviously figured things out." "I built my company partly because of you," Catherine admitted. "Every achievement, every success, was motivated by the knowledge that I had failed you when you needed me most. I wanted to become the kind of person who could have given you everything." Emma felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at being given up, sadness for the mother who had suffered, and confusion about what this revelation meant for the future. "What do you want from me now?" "Nothing," Catherine said firmly. "I don't want to disrupt your life or compete with your parents for your affection. I just wanted you to know that you were loved from the moment you were born, that giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done, and that not a day has passed that I haven't thought about." Emma felt tears beginning to fall, the emotional weight of the conversation finally overwhelming her carefully maintained. "This is a lot to process," she said. "I know," Catherine said softly, and I don't expect you to make any decisions about what happens next right now. Take all the time you need. Chapter 6. Questions and Answers. Emma wiped her eyes with a napkin, trying to regain some composure while her mind raced with questions she had never thought to ask. Tell me about my father, she said. Do you know who he is? Catherine's expression grew more guarded. His name was Michael Torres. He was a fellow entrepreneur, someone I met during the early days of my first startup. We had a brief relationship, but when I told him about the pregnancy, he made it clear that he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. Is he still alive? Emma asked. Does he know about me? He's alive, as far as I know, Catherine replied. He moved to Europe shortly after I told him about you. I don't think he's ever tried to find out what happened. Emma absorbed this information, adding another layer of complexity to her already overwhelming situation. So I have a birth father who doesn't want to know me, and a birth mother who's been secretly watching me for 18 years. I understand how that must sound, Catherine said. But Emma, I want you to know that my decision to keep track of you came from love, not obsession. I needed to know that I had made the right choice, that you were thriving with your adoptive family. And was I? Emma asked. Thriving? Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had seen from her. You were extraordinary. Academic achievements, leadership roles, community service. Your parents clearly did an amazing job raising you. Emma felt a surge of loyalty to David and Linda Chen, the people who had been there for every scraped knee, every school play, every moment of triumph and disappointment. They're good parents, she said firmly. They love me. I know they do, Catherine said, and I'm grateful to them for that. They gave you everything I couldn't. Stability, security, unconditional love. I could never compete with, nor would I want to. Then what do you want? Emma asked again, still struggling to understand Catherine's motivations. I want the chance to know you, Catherine said simply, not as a replacement for your parents, but as someone who cares about you and wants to be part of your life if you'll let me. I want to answer your questions about your heritage, your medical history, your family background. I want to share stories about your grandparents, who died before you were born, but who would have loved you so much. Chapter 7. Family History. Catherine reached into her purse again and withdrew a small photo album, placing it carefully on the table between them. These are pictures of your grandparents, she said softly. My parents, who died in a car accident when I was 22. Emma opened the album with trembling hands, seeing faces that bore unmistakable resemblances to her own. Her grandmother had the same eyes, the same smile. Her grandfather had her stubborn chin and the way of tilting his head when he was thinking. They wanted children so badly, Catherine continued. My mother had 3 miscarriages before I was born, and they thought I was their miracle. They would have been over the moon to have a granddaughter. Emma studied the photos, seeing herself reflected in these strangers who were also family. What were they like? She asked. My mother was a teacher, patient and kind, but with a steel backbone when it came to doing what was right. My father was an engineer, quiet and thoughtful, but with a wonderful sense of humor. They met in college and were married for 30 years before the accident. Do I have any other family? Emma asked. Aunts, uncles, cousins? My father had a brother who lives in Seattle, Catherine said. Uncle James. He's a doctor, married with 2 children who would be your second cousins. He doesn't know about you, but I think he would love to meet you if you're interested. Emma felt overwhelmed by the sudden expansion of her family tree. She had grown up as an only child with parents who were also only children, thinking she had no extended family beyond David and Linda's relatives. Now she was learning about grandparents, uncles, cousins, a whole network of people connected to her by blood. There's something else, Catherine said hesitantly. Something medical that you should know about. Emma looked up from the photos, noting the serious tone in Catherine's voice. What kind of medical information? There's a genetic condition that runs in our family, a heart defect that can be managed with proper monitoring but needs to be watched. Your grandfather had it, I have it, and there's a chance you might have inherited it. Emma felt a chill of fear. What kind of heart defect? It's called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, Catherine explained. It's usually not serious if it's caught early and monitored properly. I've been managing mine for years with medication and regular checkups, but it's something you should discuss with your doctor. Emma realized that this was exactly the kind of information her adoptive parents had always wondered about. Family medical history that could be crucial for her health and well-being. Chapter 8. Emotional Complexity. Emma closed the photo album and sat back in her chair, feeling emotionally drained by the intensity of the conversation. I don't know how to feel about this, she admitted. Part of me is angry that you gave me, part of me is grateful that you found parents who loved me, and part of me is just confused about what this all means. Catherine nodded understandingly. Those are all valid feelings, Emma. I don't expect you to sort through 18 years of questions and emotions in one conversation. My parents are going to be devastated, Emma said, thinking about David and Linda's reaction to learning that her birth mother had been secretly monitoring her life. They thought the adoption was completely closed. They're going to feel like their privacy was violated. I understand their perspective, Catherine said, and I take full responsibility for. I broke the terms of the adoption agreement by having you watched, even though I never interfered directly. Emma looked out the cafe window, watching people walk by with their normal, uncomplicated lives. What happens now? She asked. Do you expect me to suddenly start calling you Mom? Do you want to be part of my daily life? I don't have expectations, Catherine said carefully. I hope we can get to know each other, maybe meet occasionally for coffee. I hope you'll let me answer questions about your background and heritage, but I don't want to disrupt the life you've built with your family. I'm leaving for Stanford in the fall, Emma said. I'll be starting my freshman year, studying computer science. Catherine's face lit up with pride. Computer science. Following in the family tradition, it seems. I didn't know it was a family tradition, Emma said with a slight smile. I thought I was just good at math and logic. You get that from both sides, Catherine said. My parents were both analytical thinkers, and I've obviously built my career in tech. It's in your DNA. Emma felt a strange comfort in learning that her interests and aptitudes weren't random, that they connected her to a family history she had never known existed. Will you tell me more about your company? She asked. About what you built? Catherine's expression grew animated as she described her journey from failed startup founder to successful CEO. She talked about the early years of struggle, the breakthrough innovations that had made her company successful, and the satisfaction of building something that employed thousands of people and made a positive impact on the world. I named the company Meridian, Catherine said, after this cafe where I used to come to think and plan during the early days. Chapter 9. Building Connection. Over the next hour, Catherine and Emma continued their conversation, moving from the heavy emotional revelations to lighter topics that allowed them to begin getting to know each other as people rather than just as birth mother and daughter. Catherine learned that Emma was valedictorian of her high school class, that she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends, and that she had been accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship. Emma discovered that Catherine was an accomplished pianist, that she spoke 3 languages, and that she had traveled to over 30 countries for business and pleasure. I've always wanted to travel, Emma said wistfully, but my family doesn't have the resources for international trips. Maybe someday we could travel together, Catherine suggested carefully. If you're interested and your parents are comfortable with it? Emma considered the offer, imagining herself exploring foreign cities with this sophisticated woman who was apparently her mother. I'd like that, she said, but you're right that we'd need to talk to my parents first. Speaking of your parents, Catherine said, I think you should tell them about our meeting as soon as possible. They deserve to know what's happening, and they might have questions or concerns that need to be addressed. Emma felt anxiety rise in her chest at the thought of that conversation. They're going to be hurt that I met with you without telling them first. You didn't know who I was when I approached you, Catherine pointed out. You couldn't have warned them about something you didn't see coming. That's true, Emma said, feeling slightly better. But they're still going to be upset about the whole situation. Catherine reached across the table and gently touched Emma's hand. Whatever happens with your parents, I want you to know that I'm grateful for this time we've had together. Even if this is the only conversation we ever had, it's meant everything to me to see what a wonderful young woman you become. Emma felt tears threaten again at the sincerity in Catherine's voice. I'm glad we met too, she said. I have so many more questions, so many things I want to know about you and our family. I'll answer any question you have, Catherine promised, and I'll respect whatever boundaries you and your parents decide are appropriate. Emma looked at her phone and realized they had been talking for over 2 hours. I should probably get home, she said. My parents will be wondering where I am. Catherine nodded and signaled for the check. Before you go, let me give you my contact information. You can reach out whenever you're ready, or not at all if that's what you decide. Chapter 10. The Difficult Conversation. Emma arrived home to find her parents in the kitchen preparing dinner, their familiar routine providing a stark contrast to the emotional upheaval she had just experienced. David and Linda Chen looked up with welcoming smiles that made Emma's heart ache with the knowledge of what she was about to tell them. How was your day, sweetheart? Linda asked, noting Emma's subdued demeanor. You look like something's bothering. Emma sat down at the kitchen table, gathering courage for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important. Something happened today that's going to affect all of us. David turned from the stove, his expression growing concerned. What is it, Em? Are you okay? I met my birth mother today, Emma said simply, watching as shock and confusion crossed her parents' faces. Linda sank into a chair across from Emma, her face pale. That's impossible. The adoption was closed. She wasn't supposed to have any contact information. Emma explained the encounter at the cafe, Catherine's revelation, and the conversation that had followed. She watched her parents' expressions change from shock to hurt to anger as they processed. She's been having you watched for 18 years, David said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. That's a violation of everything we agreed to when we adopted you. She never interfered, Emma said, feeling compelled to defend Catherine despite her own conflicted feelings. She just wanted to know that I was okay. That's not her decision to make, Linda said firmly. We are your parents. We've been your parents since the day you were born. She gave up the right to monitor your life when she placed you for adoption. Emma felt caught between loyalty to the parents who had raised her and curiosity about the woman who had given birth to her. I understand why you're upset, but she's not trying to replace you or take me away. She just wants to know me. And what do you want? David asked, his voice softer now as he recognized Emma's internal struggle. I want to understand where, Emma said honestly. I want to know about my medical history, my family background, the parts of myself that I've always wondered about. But I also don't want to hurt you or make you feel like you're not enough. Linda reached across the table and took Emma's hand. Sweetheart, you could never hurt us by wanting to know about your origins. We've always known this day might come, and we've always said we'd support whatever decision you. Chapter 11. Family Decision. The Chen family spent the evening in deep conversation, working through the complex emotions and practical considerations that Catherine's reappearance had brought into their lives. Emma shared everything she had learned about her birth mother, her family history, and the medical information that could be important for her future health. The heart condition is something we need to take seriously, David said, his medical background as a nurse making him particularly concerned about the genetic implications. We should schedule an appointment with a cardiologist as soon as possible. Catherine said she could provide medical records and family history that might be helpful, Emma offered. Linda struggled with conflicting emotions, gratitude for important medical information, and resentment that it was coming from someone who had been secretly monitoring their daughter's life. I suppose we should be thankful that she's finally sharing information that could be crucial for Emma's health, she said reluctantly. What do you think about Emma having a relationship with her? David asked his wife, recognizing that this decision would affect their entire family. Linda was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully. I think Emma is old enough to make her own decisions about who she wants in her life, she said finally. And I think we're secure enough in our relationship with our daughter to not feel threatened by her getting to her birth mother. Emma felt a surge of love and gratitude for her adoptive parents, who were putting her needs ahead of their own hurt feelings. You really mean that? She asked. We mean it, David confirmed. But we want to meet her. If Catherine is going to be part of your life, we want to know who she is and what her intentions are. She wants to meet you too, Emma said. She's grateful to you for raising me and giving me everything she couldn't. Then let's arrange a meeting, Linda said. All four of us, in a neutral location where we can talk openly about expectations and boundaries. Emma felt relief wash over her at her parents' willingness to work through this complicated situation. Thank you, she said, for being understanding, for putting my needs first, for being the amazing parents you've always been. That's what families do, David said simply. We work through difficult situations together, with love and respect for everyone involved. Emma realized that her definition of family was expanding to include not just the parents who had raised her, but also the birth mother who had loved her enough to give her up, and who had spent 18 years hoping for this reunion. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. 3 weeks later, Emma sat in the same cafe where she had first met Catherine, but this time she wasn't alone. David and Linda Chen sat beside her, nervous, but determined to meet the woman who had given birth to their daughter. Catherine arrived precisely on time, dressed professionally but less formally than during her first meeting with Emma. She approached their table with obvious anxiety, understanding that this conversation would determine whether she would have any place in Emma's future. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, Catherine said, extending her hand formally. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know this situation is complicated and probably painful for you. Linda shook Catherine's hand, studying her face and seeing the same features that made Emma so beautiful. Ms. Park, Emma has told us a lot about you in your conversation. David was more direct in his approach. We need to understand what you want from our daughter and our family, he said. Emma is about to start college, and we want to make sure that any relationship you have with her is healthy and supportive. Catherine sat down carefully, choosing her words with obvious thought. I want to be part of Emma's life in whatever way feels comfortable for all of you, she said. I'm not trying to replace you or compete with you. You are her parents in every way that matters, but I hope there's room for me to be someone who cares about her and supports her dreams. Over the next 2 hours, the four of them worked out the parameters of their new relationship. Catherine would be available to answer Emma's questions about her heritage and family history. She would provide medical information and records that could be important for Emma's health. She would respect the Chen family's privacy and parenting decisions. In return, Emma would be free to develop whatever relationship felt natural with Catherine, without pressure from any of the adults involved. The focus would always be on what was best for Emma as she transitioned to adulthood and independence. I have something for you, Catherine said toward the end of their meeting, pulling out a small wrapped package. It's a necklace that belonged to your grandmother. I've been saving it for you since the day you were born. Emma opened the package to reveal a delicate silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of a tree. It's beautiful, she said, touching the pendant gently. The tree represents family, Catherine explained. Roots that ground us, branches that reach toward the future, and the strength that comes from knowing where we belong. Linda helped Emma put on the necklace, and David smiled as he watched his daughter connect with this piece of her heritage. It suits you, he said. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Emma realized that her family had just grown larger and complex, but also stronger. She had parents who loved her unconditionally, a birth mother who had never stopped caring about, and a future full of possibilities that included all of them. Thank you, Emma said to Catherine as they said goodbye, for finding me, for being brave enough to approach me, for giving me the chance to know where I came from. Thank you, Catherine replied, for being exactly the kind of person I hoped you would become, and for letting me be part of your story. Emma walked away from the cafe with her parents, wearing her grandmother's necklace and carrying the knowledge that love comes in many forms, that families can be both chosen and given, and that sometimes the most important meetings happen when we least expect them. Thank you for joining us for this emotional story about family, identity, and the courage it takes to bridge the gaps that time and circumstance create between people who love each other. Catherine and Emma's journey reminds us that family bonds can survive separation, that love doesn't diminish when it's shared among more people, and that sometimes the most healing conversations begin with the simple words, "I am your mother." This story celebrates the complexity of modern families, the wisdom of putting children's needs first, and the beautiful possibility that we can expand our definitions of love and belonging to include everyone who genuinely cares about our well-being.